Hi, this is Dr. Gayle, and I wanted you to know I have a whole bunch of other things to offer you. If you go to spunkyoldbroad.com, you will see an array of SOB stuff for sale and all our latest products and additions. If you're interested in getting on TV, I have a brand new course, Get on TV. And if you want to start your own business, you'll want my SOB Guide to Business Success. I know you'll love them all. I guarantee it.
Welcome to the SOB Radio Show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at SpunkyOldBroad1 or reach out to me on our website at SpunkyOldBroad.com. And now, back to the show.
Hi, everyone. This is Gayle Carson, and I have a fabulous guest for you today. Her name is Christine Perakis. She's a business growth architect who guides small business owners to get from 0 to 8 figures in record time, drawing from her experiences as an attorney, strategic advisor, serial entrepreneur, and C-suite executive in 10 businesses. She's also a professional licensed boat captain, which my husband was, so I can imagine what she's gone through there. And she also helps hundreds of clients on 5 continents do the same. Most recently, having survived 2 Category 5 hurricanes in 2 weeks, trapped alone in a wind coffin for almost 24 hours, and surviving in the aftermath for months without electricity, running water, and telecoms, Christine began sharing her resilience and leadership strategies that helped her weather any storm in life and business. Her upcoming book, The Resilient Leader, is released this year, 2020, and introduces these leadership strategies, the 7 barometers of resilience that can help anyone weather the Category 5 situations in their lives and businesses and to come through to thrive. Prior to that, she released her best-selling book, The Entrepreneur's Essential Roadmap, a small business survival guide, an accumulation of 2 decades of small business experience, getting from startup to scale up. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much, Gayle. And boy, I'm exhausted hearing all about that stuff.
Me too. And you know, it's funny. I've survived a lot of hurricanes, starting with, I went through, well, I didn't really go through Hurricane Andrew because I was on the road speaking, but my husband did. And when I finally made it back home, which was a whole story in itself, because I had to go from place to place and hire taxis. And then I had to get my car out of the airport, even when the police were guarding it and saying, no, you can't come in. But I talked my way into it. I know what you went through, but I can't even imagine, months without electricity running. How did you operate your business?
Well, I didn't, right? I mean, I had partners at that time, and I counted on them to actually things folded. It was a very rough time. I was scrambling here and there. You go where there's a signal. I had a US phone that never worked, and suddenly, with all the trees wiped out, I had a little signal if I walked up to the tip of a hill and stood on my tippy toes, kind of a thing, and I could get word out to people. I mean, I didn't have a communication plan. I was just so complacent as a professional rescuer, boat captain. We have all these credentials and experience, so we get really, complacent and about what we can do, what we're capable of, until a Category 5 hits. And then, a second one. But it's that whole thing that has been my message these days is about, Category 5s happen to all of us. And I'm so sorry that you've endured so many hurricanes, and they seem to be only getting worse, right? Since I think there's been 5 Category 5 hurricanes in the last 2 years. And these
of course,
monsters.
Climate change is not happening. You understand
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. But the water is so warm, the temperatures happen, and I'm afraid we haven't seen the last of these. But even if you haven't weathered a hurricane or been in an earthquake or other natural disasters, there's starting a business can be a Category 5, or having a child, or having a partnership breakup, both personal and professional. So we're all weathering the kinds of events that are simply beyond our control. And, our choices are, how do we go through these and, survive and thrive? So that's what
Well,
I'm
that's,
writing about and speaking about these days.
it's so true. I mean, there are things that have gotten better for us, and there are things that have gotten worse for us. And unfortunately, we have to adapt to all of them. And I know one of the adaptations you had to make was turning 50. So, what was that like for you, turning 50?
Well, I was really happy when I turned 40. I thought, wow, life is fantastic. So many things keep happening. And I was thinking about this because of, my plan to come on your show, and what would it be like, put myself back there, because it's been a few years again. And so, I think that we all handle these things differently. My business partner at the time, born on the same day, same year, about an hour and a half before me, went on what I call his world tour, right? He made sure everybody feted him. He had multiple parties. He had his assistant running around with a video camera doing tributes to him. And I took myself off to safari in Africa. I figured that I am going to check this off my list because life is probably over after this. So I'm going to go put myself someplace that I hadn't been before. And I was in the jungle in Africa, and I cannot tell you, I had the best birthday cake ever made for me by this gourmet pastry chef they happened to have at this safari camp. It was amazing.
Yeah,
And the
it's
people
just
there.
amazing what happens. I know I was in Africa speaking, and I went on 3 safaris. And I really, I'm a big animal nut, so I just enjoyed every bit of it. But it was very interesting as we were guided from our so-called tent to where we ate and so forth. And we were always with armed guards because you never knew if there was an animal that was going to creep up on you.
Right.
And it was so funny because I had seen everything, but I had not seen lions or tigers. And I'm a big cat person. So there was a cat, well, actually a lion commune in one of the places I was. I mean, because I was in South Africa and West Africa. And so they took me there, and I saw amazing things with lions and the tribes, and how there was a pecking order in the whole entire thing. And then I got to also hold lion cubs, which nobody would even touch. But I said, I'm game. And of course, when I was holding them, they would go, as I was squeezing them because they were so cute. And I fed them milk bottles, and I was having the best time. And then, of course, after I did that, other people did too. But I had the best time. So I know that it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for you, because I learned a lesson from the monkeys. I mean, how they work as teams and how they communicate and let people know, hey, there are these people on the way. And it was just amazing to me. So I can imagine what you went through. But, I would kind of ask you, because you said you had to go back in your mind and think about when you turned 50. I know it wasn't that long ago, but what are the differences that you noticed in your life?
Well, I mean, like I said, looking back, I think I can't believe the things that I've done since turning 50. And I was thinking as you were speaking, the last time I said to myself, God forbid, I was in my 20s and I said, I'm too old to learn a musical instrument. And I'd always wanted to learn to play the saxophone at that time. And some voice in my head, I was working day and night as a lawyer. I had no social life, and I thought, I need something. And I found myself a sax instructor, and found a beautiful saxophone in New Orleans when I was visiting. And so I started taking saxophone lessons back then. But I was ridiculously young at the time to have that kind of thinking. And, since then, so I have leapt into the things that I've always wanted to do. And there were some great things that came after 50. And that's the exciting part. I have this picture from that same trip to Africa. I had never had a dream of bungee jumping, but, there it was in front of me. So I went from Zimbabwe across the Zambezi Bridge to what I would consider no man's land, like nobody's going to claim the body between Zambia and Zimbabwe.
Right.
And this young gentleman was just kind enough to take me under his wing because I was by myself, and it took, he held onto my camera. I was so trusting, and he was so generous and sweet. He got a picture of me. They told me at the platform, the best way to get a good jump is to leap out as far as you can and spread as wide and far from the platform as you can to get the best experience. And somehow, by miracle, he had a camera on me at the exact moment I am completely horizontal in the air, flying, arms spread, superwoman, right? Making a leap off that bridge. And it's a metaphor for everything that has been going on in my 50s of just saying yes to things. Shonda Rhimes had a year. I think she's written a book about it, but she went on a speaking tour talking about the year of saying yes. And, so I've written books. I got my captain's license after 50. I've sailed offshore. I've had, raced professionally, yacht racing. And it's just, at some point when you really are looking at probably the second half of your life, you better start saying yes to things. You're going to miss them. And when you're younger, you don't feel that.
There's so many things that you said that I want to comment on. First of all, it's interesting. Last Friday evening, I went to I guess what you'd call a coffee bar, musicians hangout. And because one of my friends in one of my business networking groups was playing the saxophone, and it was so good. And so he came over to our table afterwards, and one of the other friends said, gosh, you do so well. We didn't know you played the saxophone. How long have you been doing this? Well, he had not played since grammar school. And he said he just picked it up and he had to learn the fingering and the notes all over again, but he was great. But we understand it is not an easy instrument to play. So you are to be commended that you did that. I think that is fantastic. The other thing is you don't normally hear about women being boat captains, and you did that after 50. So that is amazing, because I know, as I say, my husband was one, and I know what he went through. And we always had 3 boats in our backyard because he was like a boat fanatic. And
one just isn't enough. Right?
Yeah, right. One was never enough for him. Thank God he thought of me as one wife. But it really, I know what you went through to get that. And, the other things that you're doing, I think it is so important for our listeners to hear what you just said. Say yes to everything. Say yes to the things that you said, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know. I'm not saying say yes to bad things, but things that will broaden you and things that will make you more interesting, because that's one of the complaints I get from my over 50 women. Oh, people don't want to talk to me. They think I have nothing to say. Well, if you're doing a lot of things and you're learning a lot of new skills, you're going to have plenty to say. So I do think that, you're all absolutely a role model for this community of women of over 50. And I guess, is there anything you felt that you couldn't start or keep doing after 50?
Well, I don't ski as much. My knees have taken a pounding over the years as a former ski instructor, and I worked on ski patrol. And, I find that was the thing that started to happen.
Adventuresome, Christine. My gosh, ski patrol.
Right.
From ski patrols to hurricanes. I mean, you're getting all the weather in there. Absolutely amazing.
And you said something, don't say yes to the bad things. But the one thing we can say we know, and I'm sure this is true for every listener and anybody who's reached our age, is to say that we have come through these things, whatever the bad things were. So, we're survivors as a human race. For the most part, we can endure. And so, even if there are things that may turn out badly because we made a choice, we will get through, and there's a way to use that experience. And so that was the point for me of the hurricane that got, slammed into my head, is this one final time where I was truly felt my life was threatened and it was survival mode for days and weeks and months, is that I am going to use this experience. And that's what I used as my jumping off point for my next book. And I literally started writing that book as I was trapped in my shelter, not knowing how I was going to get rescued, who had survived outside and what was going to become of me. You know, the
Where were
panic.
you actually, Christine? Where were you?
So, on the island of Tortola, at my home in the right halfway between Nanny Key and Roadtown, if you know the island, and a direct hit. You know, the hurricane came straight over my house, my head, and that was Irma for anyone who doesn't know about that. But yeah, and so it's that recognizing the choice point I had is as soon as I realized I was trapped and I was alone and I had nothing and no idea how I was going to get out, and the storm is still raging, and it's like monster claws. A section of my shelter opening had been opened up by the storm, so the storm was coming inside, and it was just the pressure in your ears. You know this, and anyone who's been out there and experienced it. But the moment of panic was my choice. And what do you do when you don't have the internet, the phone, your people? You know, you've got nothing. What is one thing we can do is pick up a pen and a piece of paper and start writing. And so that's what I did. I said, I'm going to make the most of this moment. I'm going to learn everything I did right, everything I did wrong. I'm going to record it all so the next time I'm ready. And, you know, next time turned out to be 2 weeks later to the day. So we all have that in us, no matter what decisions we've made, what our circumstances are, is to stop the panic by kicking in our problem solving skills and that portion of our brain. And pen and a paper will do if there's nothing else.
So did you have food or water, or, I mean, how did you survive that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, that was the mariner in me, right? That I had enough water supply. It was funny because, you know, I worked with my friends the day before because I felt my home was well shored up, and, you know, we didn't know there weren't building standards for these kinds of storms. And my friends who were other mariners, who were saying, one of them kept saying, I'm going to fill the bathtub up with water. And I went to bed that night, home alone, like the only person I knew on the entire island who was alone for that storm. And I was just about to unwind, and I thought, oh, I forgot to fill up my bathtub. And thank God I did, because that bathtub of water really got me through. You know, there's some certain things that are touchstones. And so, yeah, I had drinking water, but I also had toilet flushing water, teeth brushing water. I mean, the things that make you feel a little civilized when you don't have running water, electricity, or telecoms, or cooking gas even, you know. So I had a box of Pop-Tarts, you know, or a supply of Pop-Tarts. And those are, you know, terrible for you, but boy, those things will last. You know, they have a half-life beyond the hurricane aftermath. And avocados were a good food, you know. So and then the first thing I started to do in being alone and having to, I didn't know my neighbors like many of us. We don't know the people that live nearby. We don't form communities as a natural thing. You know, 40% of our population is lonely, according to the landmark study that Cigna did. And so I had to make myself useful to others, starting with, you know, I needed rescue. And there were certain things that I didn't have, and so I had to give what I could so that others would be there for me and I would feel okay about asking for help. And so I had a working vehicle, mostly only moderately damaged. And so I went on supply runs. I found water and food for my community, and I turned over everything I didn't use, and, you know, just started helping people. It was the only thing that kept me going.
That is fabulous. Yeah, I remember that one of the hurricanes where I was here for, because one of them I wasn't, a couple of them I was not. And we owned a high rise at that point, and they had air conditioning for some reason.
Yeah.
You know, and so I don't know if we had an elevator, but we did have air conditioning. And so every night, because there was a curfew, every night by 7 o'clock, we had packed up and taken the kids and us and the dogs and the cats to this air conditioned office. We slept on the floor in the office because we didn't have a place there. We just owned the building. So we slept in the office, and then every morning at 7 o'clock, when the curfew was lifted, we packed everybody up and off we went back home. And of course it was hotter than Hades because, you know, it was August. So you know, it's really interesting how you do survive. But let's talk a little bit about your business life, because you know, there's still a lot of women who believe after 50 you can't start a business, or you can't be successful in business, or no one will hire you to be in business. So what's the difference between being an entrepreneur when you're in your 20s compared to when you're in your 50s?
Well, less things can scare you, right? Because we have been through so much. And, statistically, they say that entrepreneurs who start businesses in their mid to late 40s are far more likely to be successful than people who start in their 20s. And it's not the cultural thinking, right? I live near Silicon Beach, right? I mentor tech startup entrepreneurs, but I also work with and facilitate roundtables with senior media, entertainment, and technology executives. And their thinking is what differs, right? The senior people come from long careers, very successful, they ran teams. And some of them, especially women, tend to think there's ageism is a major barrier. And I won't discount their experiences, but it's not something that I let into my thought process, right? Where the young people, the 20 somethings, they figure, lean startup, you throw something at the wall, and if it sticks, great. If it doesn't, other people's money. And or there's more time, we'll start something else, we'll pivot. Pivoting comes naturally to younger people. And it doesn't have to be the difference between us, right? We've got wisdom, we have knowledge, we have expertise, and we can leverage all of that. And if we don't let our thoughts get in the way and we don't allow certain things to become our reality, then the sky's the limit because we know a lot.
Well, that's true. And I do think that, going to work in a corporation after the age of 50 is more difficult because they have that age discrimination feeling. I mean, they just
Yep.
say, well, I can get somebody half that age for less money. But being an entrepreneur and starting your own business, you're absolutely right. I mean, kind of when you get to 50, you've been through most of it and you've learned patience, you've learned how to strategically think about solutions, and you've been through dire things. So it's kind of interesting when we talk about things like that. And so I guess, you would be a great one to ask, what are some ways that an entrepreneur can reduce the risk when they reach that certain time in their lives? I mean, are there things that they should look out for? Are there things they should be wary of?
Oh, well, absolutely. And there's some cornerstone things I think that we all have to do to venture out into anything, right? And number one, foremost, foundational to me, the cornerstone of success is self-awareness. Right. We have that expression. I'm sure you've heard it as a boater, one hand on the boat, right? Every time you bring guests on the boat, you tell them one hand on the boat at all times because you don't want to lose anybody.
Right.
And, it's about self and situational awareness, being aware of where you are at all times and what's around you and what might be coming. And so, we're always serving in a leadership function, regardless of what we're doing. And usually, when we're running into enterprise and managing teams and, raising a family. And so, always having that piece. And so, just recognizing what do we do to break down why we have the circumstances we have, why we react the way that we do, and what can we do about it. Right. So these are some fundamental exercises that people can do to gain self awareness, to have an idea that, we're autonomic. We respond to the stories in our heads about the things happening rather than the actual things happening most of the time. And it just takes some training and an awareness of what makes us who we are. We all have a self concept, a self image, an ideal self, and our self-esteem, based on how we were loved or, rejected or criticized as children. And we tend to stay within 10% of that self-concept. And we have a self-concept about everything, how much money we make, how much we weigh, how successful we are. So it's within our power to dial up the thermostat. And we do that by altering our thinking. And that one little admonishment, keeping one hand on the boat, to me, is a starting point for anything that we do.
Well, it's so true. I mean, by the time we reach this age, we are ready for. I mean, we have already dissected our lives, and we've already dissected how we're going to do certain things. So it is a natural approach for us to be able to say, okay, let's look at the problem is not to panic. That's the whole key. Don't
Right.
panic. There are so many situations every day that present themselves that allow for people to panic and not think and just react. And you really have to be proactive. You have to say, okay, wait a minute, let's take a deep breath. Let's think about this. How are we going to approach this? Why is this happening? What can I do to counteract it and so forth? I mean, a lot of that is happening. Well, folks, we're about to finish part one of our particular session with Christine, and you can see that she's just a wealth of information and a wealth of someone who has kind of been through everything. So we're going to come back with part two. Hang with us, and it's wonderful to know someone who has not niched herself into one category. And that's what I think you're hearing with Christine. You're hearing the diversity of her life, of her entire life. So stick with us. We'll be back in a few minutes.